Sarah Young.
So, hello everyone, good morning. Thank you for the introduction, Nick. I don't even need to introduce myself now, I don't think, but my name's Sarah Young. I am a senior cloud security advocate, which sounds cool. If no one knows what my team is, there's only 4 of us in the whole of Microsoft. What we do is we're part of cloud advocacy, which you might also know as DevRel. Mostly we do stuff with programmers, but there is a small, tiny little bit of us that do security specifically. And what we do is we advocate to the security community on behalf of Microsoft, but also back into the Microsoft on behalf of the security community. So if anybody has a team that wants to do things like that, come talk to me afterwards. I am based in Melbourne, but as Nick said, I have moved around a lot. It's very confusing. I don't expect anybody to remember where I am. I am a prolific meme user in my slides. Some of them are better than others. So you can see when we go through what you think. I'm a dog mom ×2. I did want to change these slides, but I decided I would change them very last minute and couldn't. I actually have pictures of my dogs in strike hats, which I'd forgotten about, but this is them in black hat stuff. I have worked in security since, I say, before it became cool, because now it is actually very cool. And I've created a lot of content, so it's actually my job now. So that's why I have thoughts on how we create content and how we're good at it, how we're bad at it, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So, for a start, I'll talk about how we started creating content in the beginning. Then we'll do a bit of a level set, because I'm going to assume most people in here, just like me, do not come from a marketing communications background. I certainly don't. And so we'll have a bit of a level set on what I mean by content and content creators, because you're probably thinking I'm talking about YouTube people, which I'm not. There are also some really confusing content creation principles that's worth calling out. And then I'm going to tell you about some research I did. Basically, I watched and listened and read a lot of things. And then how do we fix this stuff? Because I'm sure everybody in here at some point will have to write something, create something, or review something that you've made that's security-based. And then very quickly, I might touch on challenges of scale. So, in the beginning, security people started creating things. And I very specifically use the word things because content can be lots of different, I don't want to use the word things again, but you know what I mean. And it's interesting, but it's only interesting for other security people. We used to write security things for other security people. We would flex on each other a bit. Flex is my word of the moment that I've been using for like the past month, so I'm going to use it throughout this presentation. But security, unlike the rest of the content that we make for other parts of IT, security is actually something that everybody needs to care about. Because if you're a developer and you're writing .NET, people who are going to look at your stuff are probably already .NET developers, or they are people wanting to get into .NET. Whereas with security, we have a unique problem that security content, it is for other security professionals, but it's also for everybody else, because if you put things on the internet, or if you have anything digital, there is, you know, it's relevant, right? So security content is actually not just for other professionals in the industry, but it's also for other parts of IT. It's also for the wider world as well. So that's why the stuff we create is quite different. Well, I think so. And as an industry, we don't write content well for everybody. See, check it out. Like I said, my memes are, some are better, some are worse, but I particularly like this one, because who in here, if you've ever written or made something, sends it to your teammate to check it over? Look, no one, yeah, okay, yes, exactly, of course you do. And you're like, is this good? And you're like, yeah, it's great. But exactly, so, you know, we don't write content for everybody in general. We're really good at writing it for other security people. So let's have a level set on what I mean by content. When I say content, I mean things like documents, of course, there's MS Docs. We have training materials, so MS Learn and other training things. There's also videos, there's blog posts, there are podcasts. For my sins, I also have a podcast. Go listen to my podcast. And it's any consumable media. And one of the things that's really interesting, as you probably all know, that in the last, 5, 10 years, creating your own content has become really, really accessible because all you need is a mic and a webcam and pretty much nothing else, and you can create your own stuff and put it online. And that means that we get things of varying quality, right? So content creators, what do we mean? So you might be thinking YouTube people here, so like PewDiePie or someone like that. But in fact, anyone is a content creator. So people like me, but also actual content creators. There are people, maybe more like MVPs in Microsoft land. A lot of their job is creating content. Engineers, probably folks in the room like you, PMs. We do have our technical writers, of course. But essentially, it can be anyone. This is my not so great meme, but I liked it. Like I said, I'm going to do all of them, and you're obliged to laugh at them, whether they're funny or not. I don't mind. It's all good. So essentially, thanks. Essentially, it can be anybody, and it's so accessible. I can tell you, I started doing a podcast with a couple of folks about 3 years ago. If I compare the episodes that we did now to the ones that we did 3 years ago, the difference is, they were really bad to start with, let me tell you. They're probably better now. But let's look at some content creation principles. Now, as I was saying, most of you in here, I'm sure, do not come, maybe you do, from like marketing and communications. I don't. I actually did a history degree, but that's by the by. Look, I'm going to put up 2 sets of like, I think, juxtaposition content creation principles. So, content creation should position you as an industry thought leader. Cool. But then also they say creating content for everybody is creating content for no one. So of course, I've just told you we need to create content for more people, but here we say this is not a thing. And then the opposite of that is that good content is concise and good content is meaningful and accessible. So I think those are kind of diametrically opposed. You might disagree with me, but it's really confusing because I think even if you're not trained in this, you don't know where to go. And we do a lot of thought leadership, right? Thought leadership flexing, same thing to me. Because has anyone in here tried to write something and made it sound longer than it was, and because you wanted to sound clever? Yeah. I did. Yes, of course you did. So me too. I did it in my early days of writing stuff because that's what we do. And so, yeah. So there's another problem that's worth calling out here as well. This has nothing to do with tech. It's probably more human psychology, which is the expert problem. So the expert problem is essentially the more you know about something, the worse you are at explaining it to somebody else that doesn't understand things. It's like I said, not a tech-specific thing, and that you assume people know more about something than they actually do. So you start to skip over things. It's like when we use acronyms, and we just use an acronym rather than actually spelling out what the acronym is, because we forget that people don't know. And we also have a problem with deferring to experts. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't defer to experts sometimes, because that's why we have experts, but we often go, as I was saying, we look at something else someone has written, and then we will copy it, or copy the style, because that's what that really senior person wrote. We don't challenge things. Oh, there we go. So this is a completely different talk that I could go on for ages, but I'm not an aviation nerd. I just spend a lot of time on planes. It's probably more like Stockholm Syndrome, but I find, yeah, it's true. Look, look, I have 20 hours back to Australia tomorrow afternoon. Hooray. and I've got to come back in 3 weeks. Woo. Look, in aviation, they have a principle called crew resource management. And you may know, in short, generally you have 2 pilots. You have a captain, you have a co-pilot. So the captain is ultimately the one responsible for all the final calls, but you have your first officer as well. Now, there have been some plane accidents, and they're in the the appendices of this slide deck. There are some plane accidents that have happened where the first officer, the junior, has actually seen that the captain has made a mistake, but they didn't feel like they could speak up because the captain is more senior and they couldn't possibly challenge someone who is more senior than them, and then they've usually crashed and died, which is awful. But they call this in aviation, yeah, I know, I'm not trying to make it funny, I promise. But crew resource management is something they teach in aviation all the time about how junior people should always be able to challenge their seniors. And as I said, I could spend all my time talking about this stuff because I find it very interesting. But we do that. We often defer to what has gone before, what things and content people have made before, without maybe trying to shake it up as much. And I'll take the last thing I wanted to talk about in here is this quote was given to me by my awesome colleague Mark Simos, if you know him. He's really cool, which is, easy reading is damn hard writing. It's actually really easy to just do a of your consciousness onto a page, but to make it easy to read and easy to consume is actually very, very difficult. So always remember that. So I've actually spent 10 minutes not talking about research at all, so I should probably talk about what I did. So my method, I basically decided I was going to look at security content. And I used, unsurprisingly, search engines to find this content. It was horribly manual. I'd love to tell you that I could find some automated way to do this, but being the nature of what I was doing, it was 100% manual. I spent a lot of time when I was cooking, cleaning, walking my dogs, driving, listening and reading and watching a lot of stuff. I wasn't watching when I was driving, I promise, but I assessed about 200 pieces of content for my analysis, so I realized, like, I get it. That is not everything that is out there. It's really not, but there's only so much one person can do. And to find the content, these were the phrases that I used. So, of course, if I use different phrases, I'd find a very different set of information. But the reason that I picked these phrases was to see was the kind of thing that someone who was new to security or maybe not as good at security would pick. So I did cybersecurity fundamentals, security for beginners, security how-tos. You can see them all up there. And because I think that that is the kind of content that your typical person who is not so au fait with security would probably be looking for. And I think that's where we need to be really targeted in how we do things better. Now, me just reading things and saying, this is good, this is bad, is actually very subjective and not very scientific. And I did science in school, so I tried to make it more, I've forgotten the word. You know, I did this talk, last time I did this talk, I forgot this word too. Not subjective. Objective, thank you. I can't believe that's twice I've done that now. So this was my scoring system. So I was scoring everything after these. So explains concepts with no prior assumption of knowledge. Summarizes go-dos and action steps. Can be implemented by one resource, one person, realistically. Are we clicking? Are we clicking? Doesn't link to other resources in order to complete the activity being described, because I can tell you there is a lot of that. It will give you an introduction and then you have to click through several things before you even get any instructions. I put can be consumed in under 1 hour. I realize a little bit of a value judgment depending on how quick you read and stuff, but so that was in terms of maybe being a bit subjective, but that was another one. So that was my scoring system out of 6. And finally, uses plain language. Didn't want to say use plain English, but obviously all the content I read was in English because I am not skilled enough to speak another language, sadly. But let's have a look. So I divided the content into a couple of buckets. Not-for-profit, vendor, and other content creator. So when I say not-for-profit, I mean things like anyone who's just not trying to make a profit. So that it also includes not just charities, as that's the first thing you would think of, but also government agencies. Government agencies don't exist to make profit. They exist for the good of the people, in theory. We have vendors. Hey, in theory, hopefully they don't make profit. I don't know, maybe they do over here, I don't know. No shade. Vendors, and which are obviously people like us, Microsoft, who are making products and making money. And then finally, I had a very vague bucket, which was everybody else. So I put other content creators. But what I mean is your influencers, because there are kind of some security influencers out there, community leaders. So again, like in Microsoft land, I would be talking about maybe MVPs. And just Although I didn't use ChatGPT, it would be wrong of me at in this day and age to not ask ChatGPT who writes the most cybersecurity content online. As you can see, it gave me a really rubbish response that wasn't helpful at all. And yeah, it was just like, very vague and not helpful. But I wanted to put it on screen to prove to you that I too can use ChatGPT. So let's have a look at all of this stuff, because I put it in. I'm not a very mathematical person, so I barely passed maths at school. It's not me. But I made some pie charts. So this is looking at I'm so proud of myself that I made pie charts. The content I reviewed, you can see proportionally what we've got here, and it probably doesn't come as a massive surprise. There are a lot of videos, and there's a lot of documentation. I've realized that this being transposed onto the slide has made the colors a bit difficult to follow. So just in case you can't pick out some of those, the 36% is your documentation, as you might have assumed. Video's 36, documentation's 33. It's a little bit close. Apologies. And we've got books and podcasts, etc. So proportionally, I don't think any of that should come as a surprise if you think about what you've ever searched online. And then the types of creators, and that 51% is vendors. Again, probably shouldn't come as a surprise. Vendors have the most people, they have the most resources, and they've got marketing, technical writers, and then they've got all their engineers and other people. So the vast majority, a good half of the content does come out of vendor land. And then your not-for-profits, maybe about 30%, the rest is content creators. So I don't think this should come as any big surprise here. So let's have a look. So this, I've called this average accessibility, and I need to explain what I mean by accessibility, because I know that in Microsoft, when we say accessibility, we are quite specifically talking about how people with disabilities can interpret things, and is it accessible to people who have some kind of impairment? I'm not talking about accessibility like that. I desperately tried to find a different word, but I went through the thesaurus and I asked people who are smarter than me, and I couldn't find one that was better. So no one shout one out if you can think of one. But what I mean by accessibility is how accessible it is to somebody who maybe is not a full-time security person, or who is just a random member of the public wanting to understand things. So I scored things. These are just average scores. Again, I am not great at maths. There is no standard deviation or anything in there like that, because I don't understand how to do it. It's just an average. But you can see, getting into what we can actually see here, that not-for-profits are by far and away the best. And that shouldn't really come as a surprise, because if we take some of my favorite not-for-profits, I say favorite not-for-profits, if you take CISA here in the US, I think they're really cool. CISA make amazing, really structured, really concise go-dos, telling people how to do things in plain language. They have a PDF that's 10 things you should do, and it's literally super straightforward, super easy. Vendors don't score as well because we're doing thought leadership, and also we're also trying to sound clever so people buy stuff, which I get. And by the way, I'm not saying that Microsoft doesn't have amazingly clever people. Clearly we do, but it's the way we put it out there as well. And then content creators kind of sit somewhere in the middle. I don't know. It does depend on the content creator. And then I also broke it down by the content type as well. So you can see by far and away the worst in terms of accessibility, I'm going to go for worst first, is podcast. Now, being that someone who does a podcast, I can totally understand that, because podcasts tend to be very niche, because you can just put them out there. And I don't think anyone would make you don't know security, let me do a podcast, because it's just too vague for the content type. Documentation is the best. Everything else comes out documentation comes out pretty well. Training courses. Tell you what I did find as well, which I found was very interesting when I was looking at all this content, small aside, there are some really strange bits of content out there. I'm not going to name names because that would be wrong. I'm not here to shame anyone, but I found some content that was cybersecurity advice for women. No, I'm not joking. I'm not joking. And so I was super intrigued, because I was like, what possibly do women specifically need to know that no one else needs to know? And there isn't anything. There was also cybersecurity for kids, teachers. I don't know. I feel like someone was just needing to make pages, maybe for a KPI. And yeah, I don't know, just putting it out there, because I don't think women need specific cybersecurity advice, in my opinion, but anyway. And then finally, the one that I wanted to put out here in the training courses was proportion of paywalled content. I'm sure everybody knows what a paywall is. I was really surprised that most of this stuff was actually free. Like, not very much of it was paywalled. Having said that, most of it did want you to give your email address for marketing, which I can also understand. But it wasn't as bad as I thought. And if we're thinking about, obviously, a cost of living crisis, and there's lots of people new to industry or career changes, they can't spend loads of money trying to get at content. So I was pleasantly surprised that most of this stuff wasn't paywalled. You just had to give them all your personal details instead, which I know not everybody wants to do, but I'm kind of okay with it to get some free stuff if I wanted it. The other thing about training courses that was really interesting was I found a training course that was Introduction to Cybersecurity, and it was 18 hours long. And I was like, cool. But what was better was there was the introduction to the introduction, yeah, that was 2 hours long, and yeah. Because I think if you need an introduction to your introduction, you need to relook at your introduction, but just saying. So I said we're going to look at an example. We're not actually, because I don't have a computer in front of me, but I'm going to tell you instead. So there are three documents. I took one from the Googs, I took one from us at Microsoft, and I took one from AWS. And they're all kind of equivalent documents. They are security benchmarks and security best practices. And I'm going to tell you, literally every single one of them is like 100 pages long. It means that you have to go click through a billion different documents, and realistically, no one is going to be able to do that. If you've got someone who does security on the side, if they're a sysadmin of a small, medium business that has to do security just because someone needs to do it, they do not have time to go through 97 pages of stuff, let me tell you. And they just need, go and do X, Y, Z. This is what you need to do to be secure. And I just think we forget that sometimes. I'm not saying, by the way, that there is not a place for really detailed documentation for some people, but I think we overestimate, again, because we all talk with each other and we all talk security professionals to each other, I think we overestimate how much time the rest of the general public and your everyday user has to look at this stuff. So I've ranted a lot about how we're doing it wrong, but it would be amiss of me to not talk about how do we fix this. So ask yourself, if you're ever creating some content, ask yourself these questions. Can anyone consume this content and go do the thing that you want them to do? Do you ever actually ask yourself, is this understandable? At the end of this document or the end of this video, whatever it is my viewer, reader, listener actually going to be able to understand this? And who is going to use it and for what purpose? Because I don't think we think about that. I think we just flex on each other and like, I'm going to write a good blog. I used to do that. And also, does an individual need to take a significant proportion of time out of their working day to consume whatever you've created? Because most people are busy. I know that we like to think we've written like the biggest masterpiece in the world, or we've created the most beautiful video and everyone's going to spend loads of time watching it. But people are busy, but they need to get security done. And we also know that, well, everyone knows that security, when it's put up against other priorities in business, it will tend to fall by the wayside, and we're getting better at understanding that, I think, in this industry, but we've probably got a way to go. So if you make something really hard and really long, they're probably not going to look at it or not get the main points out of it that you want them to. And going back to school, do people remember this from school? Does your material have a clear start, middle, end? Or does it sprawl because you want to go off on a rant about something to prove how smart you are? And then, sorry for the spelling, I'm not but could my mum understand this? My mum is not super tech, but if I explain it to her, she's really not. She'd be cool. I hope she never watches this video. She can understand things if it's explained clearly and without acronyms. Like, she gets it. And could a frontline worker understand this? And by frontline worker, what I mean is somebody who uses technology in their job. So that's pretty much everybody nowadays. It could be a checkout person, it could be a librarian. Can they understand this stuff? Because security is everyone's problem. Security is a team sport. We need people to know. And then I say use TLDR. When I did this presentation last time, I actually went and looked up there's actually a definition. I mean, on Business Insider, would you believe? I'm going to assume everybody in here knows what TLDR is. Too long didn't read. This, it's been around for like 20 years now. 20 years. And why is it a thing? Because in tech and online, we have always been really bad at writing too much stuff because we think we're smart. It's true. So this is what we should be remembering. We should have 4 bits. It should be 3 bits. What, why, how. We're usually really bad at actually doing all of those 3 things. We tend to do 2 of them, or maybe 1 of them, and we're not good. We also tend to ramble a bit. There's a lot of audiences. We're all, any Gen Z? Gen Z? Some at the back. Okay, so especially since the pandemic, and we say, sorry, Gen Z, I'm picking on you, but people have really short attention spans now. I know I do since the pandemic, and so we kind of do a really big long sprawl in an introduction, and people also turn off. So we need to make things concise as well, and actually cover the what, why, how in a concise fashion. So where would you start though? Because refactoring's not easy. You should target anything that you think is a key content for your team or for your product. Anything, probably particularly the how-tos, where do you start, best practices. Obviously, it's a journey. It's really easy for me to stand up here and say, go change all your stuff. But it actually takes quite a long time. And because I would be hypocritical if I did not, here is my TLDR of this presentation, which is our security content isn't written for the majority. We're quite bad at that. Not-for-profits are better in general at creating accessible content than other parts of the industry. So as vendors here, as we're all pretty much vendors, we should step up a little bit. And we have to change the way we create it as well, because I think we just spend a lot of time flexing on each other and showing how smart we are and not thinking about the people who actually need to consume this stuff. Ask yourself, could your mum understand this? If your mum couldn't understand it, probably not great. And that doesn't mean you're a bad engineer or anything, by the way, because I think sometimes we write things in a particular way because we think it makes us sound smart and it reflects on our ability as people, and I really don't think it does. The last one here I didn't touch on till right at the end here, but don't be afraid to give definitive guidance. I'm going to put Bernie up. I just think it's cute. But don't be afraid to give definitive guidance. I know that it is a really hard thing to do, to be very definitive about what you say, and because security is not 100%, we're only lowering the risk. But I think people are scared, particularly in litigious societies, that by giving some definitive guidance, saying please do X, Y, Z, that we're opening ourselves up for liability. And look, I'm not a lawyer, but there are so many people out there, and I know this from going to talk to so many different people in communities, and particularly small, medium businesses, that are screaming out. They're like, look, I don't have time to read 100 pages of your security benchmark or whatever. Just tell me what I need to do to make myself more secure. I realize that's a bigger problem because people are very scared of litigation, and particularly over here, people are even more scared of litigation because it's more of a thing. But I really think we need to be brave and step up and start being more definitive about and telling people what to do. As long as they understand that we're not completely eliminating risk, because we never can, I don't see the problem. But maybe I'm naive. So some go-dos for you. Go review your org's security content. Does it give concise advice? And could it be followed by non-security folks? If not, have a think about it. And if you can create short versions of how to do a task, like a 5-minute cheat sheet, really, really helpful. And talk about this with anybody else in your team or in your wider org that create content, because I think that the main challenge with this is that we're not even aware that it's a problem. People aren't even thinking about it. So I'm going to talk about it more to at least get people thinking. That's me pretty much done. You can tweet me, or you could just come find me in the village afterwards. Also, I'm running the Wellness Village, or at least half of it. We have Nintendo, we have stickers, I have biscuits. If you want to learn how to do a Tim Tam Slam, it's culturally important in Australia, come find me. And last but not least, I didn't get it on the slide deck, so apologies, but from 2:30 to 4, there's gonna be puppies. Clap for that, if nothing else. Clap for that, if nothing else. Because, of course, it's for Summit Assistance Dogs. It's Give Week, so they're an awesome organization. We do support them a lot in Microsoft. They're going to be bringing some of their puppies for socialization. Someone's cheering, yes. They do a lot of good work. Microsoft works really closely with them, so come and help socialize the puppies and go give them some love and then feel happy because puppies. And anyway, because puppies. Anyway, thanks very much for listening to me. This was probably slightly different than the rest of the talks today, but I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be around if you want to chat, and have a great rest of your Blue Hat Strike Day.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Sarah Young, everybody.